In this episode of New Mexico History in 10 Minutes, I, Robert Martinez, state historian of New Mexico, want to talk about Diego de Vargas. For about 5 years, I got to work as a research assistant while getting my master's degree in history at the University of New Mexico in the mid-1990s at the Vargas Project. It was a fantastic experience, and I remember learning so much from John Kessel, Rick Hendricks, Meredith Dodge, and the late Larry Miller about paleography, how to read the old Spanish documents, but also about Vargas. I learned all kinds of interesting things, like how he and his soldiers would eat bizcocho and drink chocolate while they were warming themselves up, trying to negotiate with the Pueblo people the return of the Spanish. How he had to go under investigation for abuse of colonists and embezzlement, and how he really did not like New Mexico. He wrote letters to home in Madrid, Spain, and he described New Mexico as remote beyond compare. Now, I know there are some people out there who would agree with him, but he did not have any fierce love for New Mexico. He did not leave any family here. None of us descend from Diego de Vargas. Just like Oñate, none of us descend from him. They had families in Spain and in colonial Mexico, but not here. We descended from descended from the colonists they brought. But Vargas himself, he did his duty. He was a politician. Clearly, he was a wealthy Spaniard, and he was a very political. He ended up not leaving New Mexico. I bet he wanted to. I suspect he would have liked to have been given an appointment in Peru or Mexico City or Cuba. Instead, he was out just east of what's now Albuquerque around 1704 with some of his soldiers. They were chasing some Navajo Apache warriors out that way, and he got sick. It must have been pretty bad because they brought him to Bernalillo, where he was deathly ill, was taken to the home of a Chavez family member there, and he dictated his last will and testament and then died. We're not sure, but we're kind of certain that his remains were taken, his body was taken to Santa Fe and buried underneath the church there, probably under the altar, a place of honor. Though he may have been buried in Bernalillo, under the church there. So there's still speculation about that. But Vargas, obviously, like Oñate, they're kind of like the Spanish bookends of conquistadores, I guess, but more like leaders who brought Spanish colonists, Spanish culture and civilization, language, religion to New Mexico. So around that early 1700s period marks the end of the Vargas period. His successor that will come, Francisco Cuervo y Valdes, was a Spaniard from Asturias, Spain. The governors were always Spaniards. They never let mestizos or mulattoes or local people be governors. They always sent an outsider, which sometimes could cause problems. But this guy, Cuervo y Valdes, one of the main things that we know he did, probably the main thing he did, was establish New Mexico's third villa, royal town, La Villa de Alburquerque, what we call Albuquerque today. He did this in 1706, and it's quite amazing. We know that there were already Pueblo people in the area, and there were little ranchos and estancias. These would be like small estates of Hispanic families living in the area. But the Spanish had learned from the Pueblo revolt that it was not good to have the Spanish people living scattered. And that was part of the problem. They were scattered before 1680, so it was quite easy to attack them and kill them. So you see this move by the early 1700s to have towns, fortified towns established up and down the Rio Grande. So you have La Villa de Santa Cruz de la Cañada, then you have La Villa de Santa Fe, and then in 1706, La Villa de Alburquerque. So, who settled La Villa de Alburquerque? It's the first villa in New Mexico settled by New Mexicans. By 1706, you have a lot of people who were natives, third, fourth generation Hispanics, and they're the ones who come up here officially because of the laws of the Indies. A town could not be established unless there were a minimum of 35 families, and families were always emphasized. Single men were kind of frowned upon because they seemed unstable and unreliable, and they might just gamble or leave or do whatever. But families were recruited, and these folks for the Villa de Alburquerque, they were native New Mexicans with names like Hurtado, Candelaria, Romero. So when they were established here in 1706, Cuervo y Valdes did not have enough families. He had about 22, we know from the documents, and he did something very Spanish, muy español. He established the villa, and then he named it for the viceroy, the virrey in Mexico City, de Albuquerque, el Duque de Alburquerque, the Duke of Albuquerque. He named the new villa after him, and he asked for permission after establishing the villa. And so that's what he did. There weren't enough families. Now, we don't know. There were already people living here. There were Hispanic families and Pueblo people. We know that even today, the Pueblo of Sandia is just to the north, Isletas to the south. So the new villa was essentially surrounded by Puebloan people, and they are an integral part of this expedition as well, this new villa. We know this because when you open the first page of Bautismos, baptisms, in Albuquerque in 1706, the first listing is for a Spanish child, but then the next one is for an Indian. And when you go down, it says Español, Indio. Sometimes they're Puebloan, but sometimes they're non-Puebloan Native Americans, because they are part of the story too. So out of the gate, this is a mixed community, and it's quite fascinating as you start to look at our books here in New Mexico, the baptismal books and marriage books. We don't have what you see in places like Mexico City. You don't have a libro de indios, libro de castas, libro de españoles. There just wasn't a large enough population here. Essentially, everyone's thrown into the same books as I just described. So you'll see people getting married both in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, and in the Pueblos. It'll say, I'll just make up a couple. It'll say Juan Ramos marrying Casilda Contreras, and it'll say Españoles. Okay. And then it'll say Jose y Juana, Pueblo. That means they're Puebloan Indians. And of course, sometimes you'll see Diego Romero, mestizo, marrying Juana Candelaria, Española. And you see the different mixing going on, and you'll see this in Albuquerque, you'll see it at the Pueblo of Sandia, you'll see it in all the different churches. But it gives us an idea of what the New Mexico population was evolving into. And of course, in places like Abiquiu later, you'll see a lot of Indios del Pueblo or Genízaros. This is the people that I'm going to eventually talk about. But for now, I just wanted to talk about the establishing of Albuquerque in 1706, and that'll do it for now and for New Mexico and establishing villas during the Spanish colonial period, or also called the Mexican colonial period. Thank you for joining me. Muchas gracias. I'll see you next time.